Welcome to the AANA Foundation Grants Program Reviewer Training. I'm Dr. Tamara Hagerick, the Foundation Research Director. I want to give you my sincere thanks for serving as a reviewer in the Foundation Reviewer Corps. Reviewing for the Foundation is a great way to support the future of the profession, learn about different approaches to research and evidence-based practice in nurse anesthesia, and illustrate your commitment to service. Without you, the Foundation couldn't have a robust grant program. Today, I'm going to provide you an overview of the grant programs, the review process, review criteria, the peer review meeting and summary statement, and tips for high-quality reviews. Let's start with a quick refresher on the Foundation's grant programs. Our programmatic offerings follow a life cycle approach. We have programs that support CRNAs at every level of their career. Across all the programs, there are 3 basic grant types: research, evidence-based practice, and education. Each program is tailored to the intended applicant. On the left-hand side of the table, you can see the name of the grant programs. Following across to the right, you can see the purpose, award amount, and intended applicants. When you're considering your review, you need to consider the grant program that the application was submitted to. All grant programs are reviewed using the same criteria. However, when you conduct your review, you'll want to consider the grant type, the intended applicant, and the level that they're at in their career. Applications from residents and early career researchers should be reviewed with that perspective. While the application content is the same across grant programs of similar types, it's expected that individuals earlier in their career will have a less sophisticated and ambitious projects with a smaller scope, and reviews should be conducted with that in mind. For example, the scope of what's expected for a $200,000 multi-site evidence-based practice grant is much different from what's expected in a $5,000 evidence-based practice training grant, even though the application structure is similar. Before you review an application for a grant program, we ask that you familiarize yourself with the Funding Opportunity Announcement, or FOA, for that grant program. Here are some examples of FOAs for a few of our programs. Each grant program has its unique announcement. The FOA provides information about the purpose, goals, and scope, which are important considerations in your reviews so that you know what the Foundation is looking for in applications. If you'd like to familiarize yourself with what's expected in application content, the application content overviews are available on our website in each of the grant program How to Apply sections. These provide high-level guidance on the content that will be expected in the grant application. There are unique formats for applications for research, evidence-based practice, and education grants, and the documents share what's expected for each type of program. Now I'm going to dive into the review process. There's 5 steps in the Foundation award cycle. First, the application is submitted electronically in response to the FOA. Then the application undergoes primary peer review by peer reviewers, followed by secondary review by the Research and Scholarly Activities Committee and the Board of Trustees. And if approved, then the applicant works to meet any pre-award conditions and a notice of award is issued. After award, applicants receive funding disbursements with the submission of progress reports. And at the end of the project, they submit final progress and expenditure reports, crafting a final abstract and relevance statement. Your role in this process is as a primary peer reviewer. As a primary peer reviewer, your job is to review the quality and potential impact of the research, evidence-based practice, or education project proposed. Your reviews enable the board to identify and select the highest quality projects for funding. Your reviews also enable applicants to receive feedback on their proposed work so that they know how to improve their application if they choose to resubmit. The review process starts with reading the funding opportunity announcement. Next, you log into an electronic portal to access the grant application and read it thoroughly. You'll review the application based on the designated criteria and score it using the electronic form provided. And finally, you'll discuss your review of the application at the peer review meeting. When you review applications, it's important to attend to potential perceived conflicts of interest. A COI occurs when a reviewer is named on the application or closely collaborates with the PI. Collaboration includes having co-authored a publication with the PI in the past year, currently collaborating on another project with the PI, or serving as the PI's mentor. A conflict is also in play when a reviewer has offered a letter of support for the application, or has a direct interest in, or would financially benefit from the project. We do our best to identify potential conflicts before assigning applications. In the event that a conflict is missed, it's the reviewer's responsibility to notify us of the perceived conflict, and the application will then be reassigned. So let's take a look at the review criteria for grant applications. The criteria include scorable and non-scorable criteria. The scorable criteria include overall impact, importance, rigor and feasibility, and expertise and resources. The non-scorable criteria include human and vertebrate animal protection, and budget and period of support. Here's an overview of how each criteria are scored and their description. But let me go into a little more detail for each. The overall impact score is rated on a scale from 1 being excellent to 9 being poor. So lower scores are better. For this score, you consider what's the likelihood the project will exert a sustained and powerful influence on the field of nurse anesthesiology. Note that this is not a sum of the scores from your individual scorable criteria. It stands on its own. A project may have a significant weakness in one area, but still have the potential for impact. In addition to an overall score, a paragraph narrative is required, justifying your rating of overall impact and summarizing the factors that contributed to this rating. After the peer review is completed, a final impact score is generated. This final impact score is averaged across all peer reviewers and then multiplied by 10. You will also rate importance, which is a reflection of significance and innovation. This is rated on a scale from 1 to 9, with 1 being excellent and 9 being poor. The questions to ask yourself revolve around how important the project is in the context of current challenges, how much it addresses an important gap, if there's a strong rationale for undertaking the project, if there's sufficient rigor in the background, for example, presented in a literature review or preliminary data, how much technical or conceptual innovation makes the project important, how much novel concepts or methods or technologies are employed. And once you think about all of these questions and assign a numeric score, you then provide information about strengths and weaknesses. You'll provide a narrative of strengths and weaknesses related to the significance and innovation of the project. Next is rigor and feasibility, and this reflects the overall approach. This is rated on a 1 to 9 scale, with 1 being excellent and 9 being poor. The questions you want to consider here include what's the quality of the work, the likelihood there's reproducible findings, the potential for producing unbiased information, the rigor of the design, the quality of the plans for analysis, interpretation, and reporting of findings. If it's a research project, you'll consider the likelihood the findings will be generalizable and if the sample size is appropriate. And you'll also want to think about what extent the project can be done well within the proposed time frame and if there's plans for addressing problems or challenges. For projects that involve participants, you'll want to consider if the plans for recruiting participants are feasible. And again, in addition to the numeric score, you'll provide strengths and weaknesses related to approach, rigor, and feasibility. Next is expertise and resources. This is a reflection of the investigators and environment. This is rated as either sufficient or not sufficient. There's no numeric score here. You'll be considering, do the investigators have sufficient background, training, and expertise appropriate to their career stage to conduct the proposed work? And if the institutional resources are sufficient to ensure successful completion of the work. And in addition to the overall qualitative rating, you're going to provide a narrative of strengths and weaknesses related to investigators and environment. Finally, you have the non-scorable criteria. These ratings do not contribute to your overall impact score. They're complementary ratings. For human and vertebrate animal protection, you consider the ethical requirements forecasted by the applicant. You're to judge the reasonableness of the assumptions and raise any concerns for adequate protection. And the rating is either acceptable or not acceptable. For budget and period of support, you're asked to make a judgment as to whether the costs and timeline are reasonable for the proposed activities based on the justification provided by the applicant. And the rating is either reasonable or not reasonable. After all individual reviews are in, a final impact score is calculated. This score is an average of all peer reviewers' overall impact scores multiplied by 10. Total scores range from 10 to 100, with lower numbers being better. The score is placed at the top of the summary statement, and it's the most important score. So for example, say there were 3 reviewers of a grant. Reviewer number 1 gave a score of 3, reviewer number 2 gave a score of 4, and reviewer number 3 gave a score of 2. The chair would add these scores together, divide by 3, and then multiply the product by 10. So in this instance, the score would be a 30. I'm going to go through some examples of scores and narrative comments for each of the review criteria to give you a sense of the expectation that the foundation has regarding quality peer reviews. Quality reviews are essential to ensuring that the highest quality projects are funded and to provide education back to the community. For overall impact, an example of a poor score in a narrative is shown here on the left. The reviewer gave a score of 3 with a note that the application was well written and will have high impact. While this may be the reviewer's impression, there's not an adequate detail or justification in the narrative for this score. Also, a score of 3 does not seem commensurate with the comment that the project could have high impact. Instead, a good example is seen here on the right. In this instance, the reviewer gave an overall impact score of 2 and commented as follows. Although there are some limitations with single site implementation and limited sample size, this project will employ rigorous quantitative and qualitative methods that will provide unique insights about the risks associated with epidurals during labor and delivery and how to communicate risks with parturients. If the intervention is successful, there's potential for local expansion and perhaps widespread dissemination, which would lead to sustained impact on CRNA practice in the context of labor and delivery. So this is a good example because a score of a 2 is a high score and commensurate with the comment that there is likely to be sustained impact on practice. Details are provided for why high impact is anticipated, noting the mixed methods and potential for dissemination, and also some limitations are noted, which provide some insight on why the score was a 2 rather than a 1. Here's an example of an importance rating. In the poor example, the reviewer assigned a 2 and indicated that the project addresses an important issue. This is simply not enough detail to provide justification for the rating, and no specific strengths or weaknesses were noted. In the good example, the reviewer assigned a 2 and provided both strengths and weaknesses as required. Strengths. This project addresses a critically important issue in the field of nurse anesthesiology. That is, how staffing shortages in rural areas can result in increased workload, burnout, and risks to patient safety. The authors demonstrated the importance through an extensive literature review, highlighting the limitations of state opt-out policy in increasing CRNA access, and identified critical gaps in understanding local factors that can influence anesthesia workforce in rural communities. The methods proposed to identify local modifiable factors are truly novel. Weaknesses. More detail about the availability of interventions to address the proposed modifiable factors could have provided insights and ability to address community challenges. As you can see, the reviewer cited specific examples of both strengths and weaknesses and what the reviewer expected to see that could have strengthened the proposal. Here's an example of a rigor and feasibility rating. In the poor example, the reviewer assigned a 7 and indicated that it seems that the data can be collected in the timeline that was provided. The methods for survey distribution were stellar. But there are flaws with the sample and survey questions. There needs to be survey improvement. There wasn't enough testing. Critical concepts are missing. The problem here is twofold. The reviewer assigned a 7, which is a very poor score. This may be fair, but the reviewer also noted some significant strengths that could perhaps balance out the weaknesses and improve that score. Also, not enough detail on the strengths and weaknesses were provided. What were the flaws with the sample? In what ways could the survey have been improved? What type of testing or concepts were expected? There's not enough detailed information to justify the rating. In the good example, the reviewer assigned a 4, indicating both strengths and weaknesses supporting this score. Strengths. It's expected that the survey and focus group data can be collected within the proposed time frame, and the recruitment plans were thorough, indicating or including snowball sampling. The theoretical concepts to be tapped by the survey and captured through qualitative coding were clear, with use of a theoretical model. Weaknesses. Overall, rigor was moderate. There were some inconsistencies in the presentation of the final sample size, and power analyses were not presented to support the number of participants. There was insufficient detail provided about the methods for establishing reliability and validity of the survey items. Although a theoretical model was used to generate survey items, the concepts related to patient trust and providers did not appear to be captured by proposed items. So these are very explicit examples that were cited when discussing both the strengths and weaknesses. A qualitative indication of rigor was provided, and specific limitations in the proposal were noted, such as issues related to statistical power, psychometric testing, and application of a theoretical model. So in this way, if an applicant were to receive a summary statement and reviews that included such detail, they would have enough information if they decided to resubmit to improve their application for the next round. Here's an example of ratings for expertise and resources. In the poor example, a reviewer assigned a score of 2, but noted that the program was strong and the PI was solid. The narrative here may lead to questions about why the score was a 2 rather than a 1, since no weaknesses were noted. There also wasn't enough detail provided to justify about what the program was strong and how the PI's expertise matched the project need. But also note that for expertise and resources, there are no numeric scores. The ratings are either sufficient or not sufficient. In the good example, the reviewer rated the expertise and resources as not sufficient. They supported this rating with thorough weaknesses, but they also gave credit where credit was deserved, noting strengths that were present. It's very rare that there are no strengths or no weaknesses to note in applications. Strengths. Some of the critical expertise in the project team was noted, including policy evaluation experience, and a person with lived experience was included in an advisory capacity to enhance the relevance of the research. Weaknesses. While several on the investigative team come from a strong program with a solid reputation in engaging in research, and the PI has a long career history, there was limited information presented about the biostatistician and relevant experience. There's a questionable match between the statistical analyses to be implemented and the experience of the statistician, as evidenced in the biosketch. The statistician is very junior, and experience analyzing big data appears to be missing. This is a critical flaw, as this experience is essential to conduct the proposed analyses. Finally, here's an example of ratings for human subjects protection and budget. In the poor example, the reviewer rated both the human subjects protection and budget as acceptable. However, for human subjects, they accepted a determination made by the investigator with no evidence of supporting documentation, such as from an IRB. For budget, the rating was acceptable, but a significant question about its reasonableness was raised. Also, the rating should be about reasonableness rather than acceptability for budget. In the good example, the reviewer rated the human subjects protection as not acceptable. A clear reason was provided for this rating, along with a suggestion of how to resolve the concern. They state, the investigator indicated that it's not human subjects research, but the structured methods, assessment of patient perceptions, and intent to generalize to additional sites appears to make this a research project that involves human subjects. It's recommended that the investigator be asked to provide an official determination from the IRB before funding is released, and if determined to involve human subjects, receive IRB approval. In the good example, the reviewer rated the budget as not reasonable, using the correct terminology, and again, a thorough description was provided of the concern. They state, there appears to be a mismatch in the budget and budget justification. The investigator proposes securing a large number of instruments compared to the number of participants, and the justification doesn't adequately explain the need or the cost estimate obtained. The cost proposed seem high. You'll complete your reviews individually and then submit them electronically with instructions provided by our grants and program administrator. After your reviews are complete, we will schedule a virtual peer review meeting to discuss the application. And after this meeting, a summary statement will be generated that provides an overview of the review. The peer review meeting includes the chair, 3 reviewers, and foundation staff. The chair does not score the proposal. The chair introduces the application, providing an overview of scope and aims. Reviewer number 1, the primary reviewer, provides an overview of the score driving strengths and weaknesses. Reviewer number 2 provides any additional score driving strengths and weaknesses. And reviewer number 3 provides any score driving strengths and weaknesses that were not already noted. The chair summarizes the reviewer feedback and asks for a funding recommendation from each reviewer. The options include accept with stipulations, or reject, and this can be with or without encouragement of a resubmission. The chair compiles a consensus recommendation and feedback into the summary statement, calculating the final impact score. The chair prepares the summary statement using a standard form. This statement includes application details as well as information about the review meeting and outcome. It provides the final impact score, the funding recommendation, and acceptability of human subjects plans and budget. The chair provides a narrative to review the scope and aims of the project, highlighting the score driving strengths and weaknesses discussed in the peer review meeting, and attached to the summary statement, there will be the individual review critiques. This summary statement is provided to the applicant and used by the board to inform funding decisions. So this emphasizes the part about ensuring that your reviews are appropriate, clear, thorough, and gentle, knowing that the reviews are going to go back to the applicants and could be used for educational purposes. There are some general tips that I have for you to ensure high quality reviews. First, review the FOA for the grant program to which the application was submitted. Review the full application, including all attachments. Consider the questions outlined under the review criteria fully when scoring the application. Provide strengths and weaknesses for each of the review criteria, even if you think that the application is great. Consider the type of grant application and career stage of the applicant in your review and score accordingly. And remember that the applicant will see your individual review. Consider how you would feel if you received the feedback provided as an applicant. Make sure your review is complete before submitting it in the electronic system, and identify if you have a conflict of interest and ask for a reassignment if identified. What should you be looking for in terms of weaknesses that could lead to rejection? Here are several common pitfalls. This is a list of the reasons most frequently encountered for rejection. These are applications that do not meet basic deadlines or requirements for submission, lack innovation or potential impact on nurse anesthesia practice, are inconsistent with foundation research priorities, have missing knowledge or skills in the project team, include aims that are not feasible, propose an approach that is not scientifically rigorous, include methods that do not match the question, or an analysis strategy that does not match the methods, have an unrealistic budget or timeline, or exhibit poor writing. Thank you for advancing the science of anesthesia by serving as a reviewer in our Reviewer Corps. I hope this presentation provided a solid foundation for you to serve, and if you have any questions about this process, please reach out to us. We're here to help.